Everything's coming up Jihad. Daniel Greenfield's column for Wednesday, June 13th, 2012. Daniel Greenfield's columns can be found at sultankanish.blogspot.com. I am Adam Taxin, your reader. Everything's coming up Jihad. June has been a banner month for Muslim lawsuits against the NYPD. First, Muslim advocates filed a lawsuit against the NYPD on behalf of some New Jersey Muslims attending mosques that the NYPD had assessed as a potential terrorism risk. The Muslim advocates, like every other Muslim, quote, civil rights group, has a history of covering up and defending terrorism. The media is full of sympathetic interviews with Muslims who are baffled as to why the NYPD might be surveilling mosques and imams. Farhood Kara, the head of Muslim Advocates, complains, there was explicit reference to the fact that they weren't targeting Syrian Jews or Iranian Jews or Egyptian Christians, but really the focus was on Muslims. The extensive Coptic Christian and Persian Jewish terrorism sprees aside, the goal here is to get the NYPD to play the same three blind monkeys game that federal law enforcement has taken up. And the only answer is the TSA-ization of the NYPD, as the last remaining counterterrorism force will prove that it isn't singling out Muslims by surveilling Methodist churches and Hasidic synagogues for signs of terrorist sympathies. Less notable, but in some ways more significant, Farhan Doe, a Muslim rejected by the NYPD because he said gays should be imprisoned, has sued the police for rejecting him because of his views. Farhan Doe isn't alone in believing that, but unlike non-Muslim applicants, he comes out of a cultural and religious background in which imprisoning people because they offend your morals is the duty of law enforcement. Farhan's, predictably Jewish, lawyer says that his client has the right to believe whatever he pleases, and he has a point. But the question is, with enough Farhans in the political, judicial, and enforcement arms, how long will the rest of us have that right? Tolerating people who will not tolerate you is fine, so long as they draw the line between ideas and action. The NYPD isn't surveilling New Jersey mosques because there are some bigots in blue who dislike immigrants, as the Associated Press, the American Civil Liberties Union, and the whole lawyer media complex would like you to believe. It's doing it because New York City's biggest serial killers and aspiring serial killers are Muslims, who kill in the name of their ideas. Their biggest idea is that Allah had sent Muhammad to make Islam victorious over all religions, even though the infidels may resist. Quran 61:9. And when the infidels resist, that's when you kill their soldiers, sue their police officers, and blow up a few buildings. Then you complain to the media that the infidels are persecuting you by spying on the mosques where the big idea is declaimed to the faithful and refusing to allow you to join the police force just because you think that Islamic law supersedes American law. The clash of civilizations is all-encompassing. It doesn't just cover the big thing, like ramming planes into skyscrapers, but also the little things. Police forces don't enforce law as much as social harmony. The 90s featured a grand experiment in changing troubled neighborhoods by improving their quality through selective enforcement on quality-of-life offenses. The NYPD's successes were credited to that experiment, but who decides what social harmony and the social good are? For Mayor Bloomberg, it's banning large sodas. For Farhan Doe, it's banning homosexuals. When there is no limit to government infringement on rights, then the law is a collection of bugbears and control mechanisms. Islamic law on covering up women got its start when one of Muhammad's companions spotted one of Mo's wives at night and was able to tell her apart due to her height. This somehow made for a convincing case for compelling every woman to be covered up head to toe. It's senseless, but so is fighting obesity by banning people from buying large sodas. When the obsession of a few men is turned into law, then the result is equally contemptuous of the individual as a rotting sack of vile habits which he has to be forced to abandon by law enforcement. Once you abandon the rights of the individual to the fiat of activists, judges, and politicians, then laws can be made by anyone who wants them badly enough. The same process of judicial activism, hysteria, violent attacks, and pressure groups that created gay marriage can one day lock up the happy couples. It's only a matter of who is making the laws. The Arab Spring has revealed the ugly truth that, given the vote, the Farhans in Egypt, Tunisia, and Turkey will vote to imprison gays, oppress Christians, suppress women, and all the way down the long, awful checklist of the Islamic formula for a moral society. Margaret Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale is a fantasy in America, but it's how most people agree things should be in the Muslim world. The media is selflessly dedicated to lying about that simple fact, no matter how many of their reporters get raped, taken hostage, or killed, until the truth becomes impossible to conceal. Back in cosmopolitan New York, the idea that we're about to go the way of Cairo is absurd. But then again, Cairo was once a cosmopolitan place. At least until the more cosmopolitan parts of it were burned down. Oslo, Paris, and London still are, but like Weimar, the clock of cosmopolitanism in those places is ticking down to its final hours. The secret of all societies is that they are all democracies in their own way. A government can repress its people, shoot them in alleyways, and run them over with tanks, but it cannot be at odds with their values for very long. The jet-setting dictatorship of the enlightened who clink champagne glasses over international law is a global Weimar that will collapse in a rotten heap when enough men shouting Allah Akbar march through their streets. And the timeline for that is set by biology and airline schedules, but it's also set by power and the acceptance of the inevitable. Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer has suggested that it might be possible to outlaw burning the Quran because it gets people killed. This is shorthand for saying it upsets Muslims who then go out and kill people. Given a choice between doing something about the Muslims who are killing people or the freedom of speech that infuriates them, Breyer, like most of the transatlantic left, chose to do something about freedom. But homosexuality also upsets people like Farhan Doe. What happens when they decide to kill people every time an episode of Glee airs? Do we outlaw Glee? If we can outlaw burning the Quran, then why not? If it's a question of pressure groups, the followers of Muhammad can easily top rallies and it gets better videos. And when the time comes, they will. Is a society that is unwilling to draw the line at the Bill of Rights really going to draw the line at Greenwich Village and Castro Street? Why don't we do as Farhan suggests and lock up gays? Ask a liberal and the answer will be sputtering outrage, just as if you were to ask an imam from Al-Azhar why you shouldn't lock up gays, the response would be sputtering outrage for the opposite reason. There might be some mention of the Bill of Rights, but the Bill of Rights is dead in the age of the living Constitution. If rights are whatever the sophistry of a panel of federal judges says that they are, then they are no different than Bloomberg's soda laws or Muhammad's burqa mandate or Obamacare's health insurance mandate. In a society like this, laws are like levers. If enough pressure is applied in the right place, they get put up or torn down. Farhan Doe, on his own, wouldn't be able to lock up too many homosexuals, though, as a police officer, he would have plenty of discretion for taking in people on the usual charges like disturbing the peace or failure to obey a police order that can be used to arrest nearly anyone at any time. But what happens when a police force has a lot of Farhan Does working on it? For the answer to that, we can take a trip to sunny Dearbornistan, where Christians were arrested for disturbing the peace and failure to obey a police order, which, as it turned out, was a legalism for being Christian in a place claimed by Muslims. Dearborn Police Chief Ron Haddad, not to be confused with Ron Haddad Jr. of Illinois, charged with domestic terrorism, testified that a protest outside an area mosque should not be allowed to take place because its imam had told him that it would be worse than 1,000 deaths. Presumably, 3 of them would be worse than September 11th. That's how it works. Add enough Farhans together and suddenly the system operates on a different set of assumptions that signify the clash of civilizations has happened, and civilization has lost. For decades now, the civil rights movements have been dedicated to taking away other people's rights in the name of entitlement. That has brought us to a state of affairs in which religious institutions are obligated to cover abortions, white students are seated at the back of the college admissions bus behind black students, and wedding photographers are sued for not wanting to shoot gay weddings. This is not a society that frees people from oppression. It's a society that oppresses everyone in the name of someone else's greater good. The Muslim Brotherhood's arms in America operate as civil rights groups, and Islamization is a civil rights movement as much as any of them. Like them, it believes in taking away the right of other people to be left alone, to live and let live, and to be treated equally under the law. Like every radical group, it is demanding the right not to be investigated by the police, the right not to have its ideology treated as the contemptuously vicious creed that it is, under the red baiting or Islamophobia clause, and the right to aspire to one day take away everyone else's rights. There are police forces in the Muslim world, but they're tasked with arresting blasphemers, jailing runaway brides, and conducting virginity tests on women found alone in the same room with a man, and occasionally hanging the homosexuals who, as Monsieur Ahmadinejad assured us don't exist. Because as soon as they exist, they are killed, resolving the paradoxes of Islamic morality and Schrodinger's cat in one instant. The difference between their forces and ours is Farhando. The end.